I want to talk about the launch of my upcoming new Ancient Mystery School, which is going to be the Golden Rose Mystery School. And so I'm doing this video because, well, for many reasons. It's something that can't really be conveyed. Humanity, we're moving out of this world of materialism, which is like everything is kind of physical. Whereas like, okay, what am I going to get? And you can see it physically. I can tell you that you're going to get X, Y, or Z. You see, when you're coming into an ancient mystery school, a true ancient mystery school, these are schools of consciousness. And so once you go beyond the plane of physicality or matter, nothing is physical or tangible anymore. And so, of course, as you can imagine, you can't really sit down and say to somebody, you're going to get this, that, and that, because these are not tangible things. These are expansions in consciousness. And so they're quite difficult to be able to convey without having the experience. And of course, then I can put somebody into the paradox of, well, how am I going to commit to something if I don't know what I'm going to get? So you can imagine the kind of a headache that you have in this world of trying to convey this, which also aligns the fact of anybody who feels the call to take such a journey is taking a leap of faith. They're taking a step into trust. And that's how the work on the higher planes of consciousness works when you work at like the level with the masters, we'll say, is you have to have a form of trust. And the more you trust, the more that you're open to receive. And that's one of the things that the way that these mystery schools work. And these are worked very much in the ways of the ancient mystery schools, which is they're schools of conscious expansion, they're schools of healing, they're schools of learning, but not anything like a school what we would consider in our modern world, that very rigid physicality of a school is I'm going to sit down here and I need to learn this off verbatim, rattle, rattle, rattle. These are nothing like that. And again, working at the level that I work as an adept means that I have the consciousness and the mastery to be able to wield these schools in the way that they were done in the very, very ancient times, which is the ways of an alchemist, as a hierophant, as a high priest, adept. For me, these are just the same things. They're just different cultures, labels on certain levels of consciousness, we'll say, which means that holding this space, which I'll touch on a little bit anyway, it means that I'm transmuting the energy of those in the space. So as you can imagine, it's quite infinite, it's quite vast, and no matter what I say is never going to convey exactly what happens in this mystery school. But the point of this video is to try. So this video is going to be more so for anybody who maybe has an interest in the school, who is curious to know about it. And for as much as I can share objectively with words here to explain what the experience is like, what we do in there, how it kind of works, this is all a materialistic approach of what I'm going to describe, of what to expect in this school. But of course, the experience is something that's not physical. It's a shift in consciousness. It's an awareness. It's a shift in reality. You're going into a whole new degree of consciousness through the space of this school. So just to bear with me that there's many things I'm going to say here that won't be fully conveyed. There's many things that I won't say because either I'll forget to, because it's so infinite in what happens in this space. So just to bear with me that I'm trying to convey something that's really non-conveyable in its entirety. But its purpose of this video is for some of you who might be interested in this space or this school. And the school, just to be clear, this is the Golden Rose Mystery School, which everything I work under now is the Golden Rose. That's the way that it works now under Master Kem Shevu, which is the channel that I work in, which is guided by the Ascended Masters, Master Kuthumi and Yeshua in particular. Master Kuthumi is my main guide, who has always been there, who has taught me since I was quite young, since I was about 6 years of age, up until now, until the time being ready, we'll say. I've had two ancient mystery schools before this. I've had the Temple of Thoth, which had to be changed then through my own journey into the Temple of Horus, which had to be changed again into where we're now ready as I've gone through my 4th degree initiation into adeptship, whereas now this is going to be the Golden Rose Mystery School, which hopefully, unless they ask me to change, is going to be a kind of a constant as I go forward. But what happens in the space always changes because I work in alignment with consciousness and with the masters and what humanity goes through at any given time. And so, first of all, an ancient mystery school, and there's a lot of mystery schools in the world today that, in my personal opinion, and again, I'm not members of these, so I'm not labeling anything here, or I'm not attacking anything here. I want to be very, very clear. But from what I pick up, many of them don't have the level of consciousness holding this space anymore, which means that I don't feel them actually being able to work as in like a ceremonial magician or an alchemist to transmute that level of shadow, which is a clearance of the way for the participants there so that they can make profound shifts that they most likely would not be able to do on their own. Because the level of consciousness of the Hierophant or the adept holding the space, we actually clear a lot of your shadow or hold it when we take you into the space and let it feed to you by how you are ready, because you're always in charge in the space, something I'm going to touch on. As you can imagine, it's quite vast. So what is an ancient mystery school? So they're consciousness schools. And you see, consciousness in its expansion is the evolution of, it's our evolution basically. And you see, a lot of schools in any form or any modalities or teachings that you go to, you're learning one thing. And so it's just one beam of learning that goes, okay, we're going to study X, Y, or Z. And so you're just studying that one thing. But you see, there's only one consciousness. It's the all. It's divinity itself. And we're part of it. And you see, if we want to expand in consciousness through a true evolution in a balanced way, we have to expand in all degrees at the same time. It's like a sphere or a ball. Well, if I just expand out one arm out of that ball, that's not in balance because the rest of the sphere hasn't expanded at the same degree. So what we do in a mystery school in a true expansion of consciousness is we're expanding in all levels at the same time. So it's actually a balanced expansion through our whole experience, which is a shift in consciousness. And like in the schools, what happens is like each subject or each modality is just another expression of the same thing. And the way I describe it sometimes like as an analogy is like if you think about the spokes of a wheel, you have a wheel. And let's say the wheel is consciousness. And so we're trying to look and figure out what this thing is. What is this that we're a part of? And also who we are. So I take one spoke of that wheel and I look into the center. And that gives me, let's say for example, maybe that's Hermeticism. Okay, so now I'm studying Hermeticism, which is really founded in Egypt, you could say. Okay, so now, but that's really what it is, just remember, is divinity or consciousness. But if I study Kabbalah, Kabbalah is the exact same thing. It's just a different culture or means of studying the same thing, which is consciousness or divinity. So Kabbalah now widens my understanding of Hermeticism. Hermeticism widens my understanding of Kabbalah. And they kind of keep themselves in check. Then you go into like symbolism, another spoke in the wheel. You go into like mythology. You go into different cultures, go into modalities like ceremonial magic, theology, theurgy. And just remember, all these are means of studying the same thing. And so each modality, each culture are all enhancing what we understand about the other ones. And that's how a true expansion happens in consciousness. Because you could just study Hermeticism and you'd be blindsided. And see, sometimes those terms, which are material-based words, are quite confusing. Hermeticism is just a term that we have labeled from what came from the Egyptian tradition of what their understanding of consciousness and how to wield it is. You go to Persia, you're going to go into something like Zoroastrianism, and we talk about like the Zoroastrian Magi and the way that the Magi worked in there. Well, that's their labeling of how they understand, navigate, and wield consciousness. So they're doing the same things. They might approach it in different ways, but it's a science of understanding the same thing, but just different cultures come at it in different ways. You talk about shamans, true shamans in the ancient traditional cultures. Well, they have to understand what consciousness is, the different planes of consciousness, and know how to wield it in order to heal. Same thing. Then you go into the likes of the metaphysics, of the cosmologies of different cultures, of the Hindu culture or whatever else it is. It's the same thing. It's their mystics throughout different times have traversed the planes of consciousness and learned it, because once you go beyond the plane of matter, you're into non-material consciousness. And you see, you cannot understand non-material planes of consciousness by testing or examining, because that's when the human system has to navigate them themselves. As in, we cannot create technology that's going to help us to understand the higher planes of consciousness. It will never be able to, because it's non-material. Because we would create a piece of equipment to study the thing, and then we'd come back and we'd read the output of that piece of equipment to try to understand it. And you see, that's a materialistic approach of consciousness. And so the human system is the only thing designed to actually have the experience outside of matter to really understand the science of metaphysics or any of these mystical traditions or or approaches. And don't worry if this sounds quite heady, because this is me just trying to put into words something that really can't be put into words. But this is what you experience in the mystery school. You have an experience. So I use a lot of these different modalities because I understand them all at my own degree because of my own navigation. So I cross-reference everything, building up the deeper understanding and picture of what you're going to understand. And so that is what a consciousness school is. So overall, in a simplistic way of describing it, an ancient mystery school is a school that expands your consciousness, but to phenomenal levels. As I said, you're not just learning about something. Like, you could go and sit in a class and study, shamanic practices, for example. Okay, but you're getting an idea of how somebody works something. But you're not really learning the science of what consciousness is, to be able to wield it better, to work it better, to understand it better. So it becomes so scientific that you know how you're going to approach it because you have the science of what you're actually about to work. Never mind, just remember, the practice is just the surface. That's the materialistic crust. You're learning the depth of what that practice is really, really doing. And not from a materialistic point of view, but from the science of consciousness itself, because you now have an experience that correlates it without any shadow of a doubt, how it operates, how it works, and so how you can wield it, and also how you can align with it better. And so, as I was saying, I work this school at the level of the very ancient schools. I've just come into my 4th degree, through my 4th degree initiation, which is into adeptship, which is like a Western master, you could say. So understanding consciousness, understanding how to wield the energetics. So I work as a magi, as an alchemist. Again, these are just different terms that have just come from different cultures. And so that's the way that I work this space. And so the space is a 12-month commitment, the school. It's online to suit today's world, as any of the schools come back and they adapt to the time that we're in our civilization, to give it the best approach or working as possible. And it's limited to 12 aspirants per year. That doesn't mean that there will be 12 in the space every single year, but it's open to 12, a maximum of 12 aspirants that will come through each year. And as I said, it's a 12-month commitment. So this video is just to give information. Anybody who is interested, we'll follow up with a call to go over kind of any of the questions that you might have and what's involved, because this is a synergetic experience. It's not just what I'm going to bring, but it's what you're going to be open to engage as well. So there's commitments that are required on both sides when it comes to a mystery school. So just to be really, really clear. And so working as the adept or the hierophant in the space, before I take anybody into the space, I know your shadow, because at the level of my consciousness, that's where we're going to be working. I'm going to work your shadow, your unconscious, or your parts, imbalances to be healed. I work it at the level of consciousness that I operate from, which is why I can take people through such a vast conscious expansion in the space of 12 months. And so I know exactly what I'm working with. I also know that some people might not be ready for this space just yet, but the space is open to everybody. It's a case of requirement is responsibility and accountability. I need to know that those who come in are going to be responsible for their own work and be accountable for what comes up for them to deal with. The space is there to hold, to guide, to support, to transmute, and everything else. But I can't walk your journey for you. I can move everything in the higher planes. I can rebalance them. I can recenter them for you. But you are the one. It's your physical body. It's your physical experience has to actually physically take the steps on the journey. And so that's why it's open to everybody. But there are agreements in place, we'll say, which I go through when I have a call with somebody anyway about who might be interested. And so you've heard about the term the mysteries, which is where we have these terms of the mystery schools. And so what are the mysteries? Well, the mysteries are the mysteries of humanity, the mysteries of consciousness, the mysteries of this experience of what we call life that is not known by the masses, because few people have different time periods in humanity. I say few, but there's been quite many over the vast expanse of time, you could say, have journeyed into these mysteries. And it's those who seek, we say truth seekers, or those who seek something far beyond what the surface shows you, because something calls you. Something has always felt that there's a lot more going on. There's a lot more to be experienced in this experience of life than what we've just been told. You're born, we grow you to a point, you get educated into a particular, or indoctrinated into a particular system, to get a certain job that pays well, marry, home, and then you die. And you see, all through time, mystics and different people from different cultures have just felt that there was something far greater that called them, we'll say. And so that something, because it's unknown, is a mystery. And so in those mysteries, what happens is, in the communication with divinity, which a lot of mystics have had, and union, or yoga is another term for the exact same thing, is when we create yoga or union with the divine, what happens is that over time, throughout different times in history, those mystics or adepts or prophets, sages, Brahmins, magi, alchemists, whatever you want to call them, they're all the same levels of consciousness, have union with the divine, and then they come back down and they share this wisdom with humanity because it's a higher wisdom, it's a truer wisdom, and it actually aids in the evolution of the species. So when you look at any sacred texts, esoteric texts, just remember, you're reading verbatim words on the surface. They're just objective. But those words are being conveyed by somebody who has had an experience much further up in the higher conscious planes. And you see, because up there is not, say up there, but everything happens in the one space, of course, but they're attuned to it. When you have experiences there, it's no longer an objective reality. Like space and time doesn't exist in the same way. For example, I can say the time is right now and the space over there sits a glass of water. So I can point that in space and time, in physical plane consciousness, this is where the glass of water operates from. Once you leave the physical plane consciousness as to what makes up this, what's the consciousness of this glass, how did it come to be, what's in it, and why is it in it, and all these different things of the non-physical parts, you see, objective words will no longer work in the same way. And so words then have to become symbols, and they become symbolic expressions of consciousness. And so these ancient and sacred texts that are conveyed by people who have these experiences have to be opened up consciously, because they're talking about things that are no longer objective or physical, and so they have to be opened up as symbols. And that's why the language of consciousness or divinity is symbolism, another language that you will learn in this space quite devoutly and quite powerfully, as the guidance and the language of divinity itself that speaks to you personally, speaks to us all personally. But how it speaks to you and how it speaks to me will be different. But the language is symbolism that you will be taught in this space and that you will learn quite deeply, naturally, over the evolution and the navigation of your 12 months within this space. But to come back to these mysteries. And so what we do in the mysteries is we unveil nature. We unveil divinity in our experience, because divinity is everything. It's happening all around us. You're just not recognizing it because you've been taught in a world through conformity and conditioning. And I'm not saying that's intentional, it's just how it is. We also understand this. And as you evolve and grow, you're taught in school that this is what things are. And yes, they are, but there's always deeper truths, and that's what we navigate in these mystery schools. And not just navigate them as in, like, I'm going to sit in this space and I'm going to tell you that this is that and that is that. That's not how they work, you see. Once you go beyond physical plane consciousness, and by the way, this is where humanity is now evolving into, beyond matter. And so this school is really aligned in moving us forward into where we are now in humanity and where we're going to be heading, which is non-material based. And so the way that we teach in these spaces is you're guided, but you have the experience. So your normal day-to-day life is going to happen over the 12 months. But with the wisdom and the way that it's guided, and also through the process of augury, because I guide you at what's going to happen before it happens so that you're equipped. And it's all about the alignment in the greater consciousness, which is where we get flow from. And so you're actually learning all these modalities by the correlation of what you're getting in the space, how it matches what's actually happening in your physical day-to-day lives. And so you're actually learning the wisdom through your own experience, not because I say so, because that's not how we teach in these spaces. Because that's not true teaching, that's not true learning. That means that you're just taking what I say. But what if I was wrong? What if anybody was wrong? So you have the experience yourself means that you trust it for the way that you experience consciousness. And so that's what it's about. And you see, what happens with humanity when life gets difficult is we're out of alignment in consciousness. There's imbalances. So when we have issues in our lives, when things are not going wrong, why does this problem keep happening? Why does the repetition keep happening? Why do I keep repeating the same things? Why is money stop flowing? Why is Why am I always seen to be full of anxiety? Or why am I always miserable? Or why am I always suffering? Or why does this not work out? Why does that? Whenever things are like that, that shows that there's a misalignment in consciousness. And so unveiling the mysteries is to come back into alignment with consciousness. There is only one consciousness. It's divinity itself, and we're all part of it. And you see, because a part of the human condition and the human shadow is we have more free will. We have free will, which means that our free will can make us make choices that go off the centralized or divine path. That's when things get difficult, and those things I just described. And so the whole goal in our evolution is to come back into alignment, into balance, into flow with consciousness, where things come to us by exactly who we are. That we don't go running ahead, putting extra pressure on ourselves, that we don't hold ourselves back when we actually have capabilities to move forward. It's about finding the alignment of consciousness, releasing control, to think that the human is in control of everything. It's like, no, we're not. Divinity is number one. And it's our role to fine-tune ourselves through mastery, to come into alignment and put our personal will in alignment with where the divine will goes. And a simplistic way of putting this in one small scale of a cycle is nature. If you think about the 4 seasons, the 12 months of our year, that's our navigation around the sun. We've made time from this, by the way, but that's a cycle of consciousness. And so if you look at the trees or the plants, so in winter there's death, there's no growth. Spring we get is the beginning of the year where the new sprouts come up. Summer is when we get into kind of full glory and you know, in the light months. Autumn is when we harvest. The leaves start to wither, they fall off. And what they do is then we come into winter, and they actually fertilize as the growth falls off into the earth, and it fertilizes the growth into the following year's growth in spring. And you see, that's nature. That's consciousness. And so these mysteries are coming back into the alignment of consciousness so that we're more in flow. And so throughout time, you've had different mystery schools. You have the Eleusinian mystery schools. You've had the mystery schools around Mithras. You've had them around Dionysus. You've had the Egyptian mysteries. And you've all these different variations. And some of the different schools followed some of the different mythologies, you could say. You know, the Eleusinian was about Persephone, who went into the underworld for half the year and then came up again. And that's about us going into the shadow, into the darkness and the navigation of the shadow, to understand ourselves, to understand the wounds that we carry, those difficult parts that maybe we otherwise wouldn't face because of fear and what have you, and conditioning. But we go in there to transmute them because that's what nature does. Nature takes us through 6 months of darkness, 6 months of light. Summer solstice before we start to delve downwards. Winter solstice when we start to rise upwards. And then we have our equinoxes. And these are all the alignments of natures. And so in the mysteries, we go through the ancient wisdom, the sacred wisdom, through every culture. And the way that I operate is through them all. And you're learning them all because they're all really the one thing. They're just different cultures' own expressions of the navigation of the natural cycles of nature, and using them to transmute, to work, and to empower ourselves by aligning with consciousness itself so that we are in flow and that life doesn't get difficult. But of course, the difficulties is the process of breaking the conformity and the habits that we have of how we're actually misaligned. And so that's what we do, is we come back into alignment, which takes us into purpose, divine purpose, where I'm no longer operating in a way because I'm chasing something, because that's probably a wound that's in my system, that I actually start to come back into balance and flow. And I develop more of who I actually am in my divine purpose. Who am I? What are my gifts? And who is it I'm here to be? Because I'm here to be a version of myself that can be the best that I can be. And that's going to have the greatest impact, first of all, in humanity and its evolution, but in my life as well. It's also going to satiate me. You know, I can run and, you know, money is such a big thing in today's world, and money carries a lot of shadow. There's nothing wrong with money. It's an energetic exchange, but it carries a lot of shadow that direct people away from purpose. Because money means safety, it means security, it means love for a lot of people. And so you could chase money, chase jobs and careers just based on money and be absolutely miserable. So when we come into alignment, into flow and into purpose, it takes us into a place where we come into ourselves, where we start to become the best versions of ourselves, which is the only way that we can satiate ourselves and be satisfied with what we're actually doing and becoming. And with that, obviously, if it's in around work, money comes then in your passion, and in a balanced way, in a way that you can manage, in a way that you're not overextending yourself, chasing it, but in a way that you trust because you are in the flow of consciousness. And these are all what happens when we start to unveil and move away from the human condition, materialism, and come into the flow of the divine, aligning spirit into matter and that union of masculine and feminine, spirit and matter. The squaring of the circle, as we talk in the sacred geometry, and all these different conscious languages, and that's what they mean. Creating the divine child of Horus out of the unification of Isis and Osiris. And so even if you look at the ancient mystery schools of old, the initiates that went through those schools are names that you still know very, very well today. You know them most likely as philosophers or different things, but we know them as the initiates. So you've now heard of like Pythagoras, great master. He's known in today's world for the Pythagoras theorem, which he didn't invent. He would have been taught this through his learnings through the mystery schools. Pythagoras coined the term philosopher, a great master, initiated in many of the ancient mystery schools. And the reason that you know his name today as a mathematician, as a great master and a teacher, and there's so many different variations if you really study him, is because he was an initiate in the mystery schools, in many mystery schools, and because he stepped into his power, into his purpose. So the alignment of consciousness and purpose means that you're not working for yourself. You are, but you're not working for yourself as your intention. You're working to be who it is that you're meant to be as what divinity aligns with you. Again, that language of symbolism, when you read it, it can direct you in that path, something else that you're taught in the space. So you've heard of Pythagoras, you've heard of maybe Manetho, Iamblichus, Porphyry, Plotinus, Plato, Aristotle, Homer, Cicero. The list goes on and on and on and on of all these different people who have been initiated in the mystery schools, but you recognize those names because we still study them today, because the works of art and the poetry and the stories and the tales and the mathematics and the philosophies and the geometry and everything, Euclid, another one, that they've all taught, is still used today because they went beyond their time, because they weren't living in the masses on the surface, the conformity. Well, they got rich off this, so I'm going to copy that. They're doing this and I'm going to do that. Is they went outside the safety of those lanes of conformity and conditioning and went on the path to discover themselves. And in discovering themselves, they flourished their purpose. And in your purpose, the analogy I often use with my students is, consciousness is like this one great machine. And every conscious piece in it, all of us as individuals, we're a cog. We're all a cog. And your only role is to polish your cog so that it works in that machine as best as possible. And so, of course, if you polish yourself as the cog, your life gets better. But you also make the machine run better. Consciousness itself, humanity, evolution, aiding to the evolution into light and away from darkness. And that's what these mystery schools have done throughout time. Because you're moving away the conditioning, the wounds, the imbalances of your system that prevent you, that create fear for you stepping forward into who you are. The fear of being seen, the fear of being judged, the fear of society maybe not accepting you. And so you hold back your gifts, or your potential is never really potentialized. That's what are done in these spaces. Phenomenal shifts in the space of 12 months by the level of shadow that we transmute because of the level that can be worked. Again, as an adept, as a hierophant, as an alchemist, as a magi, to be able to wield that shadow at that level, for you to be able to step in and take greater strides into becoming who you are over the space of the 12 months. This mystery school for me, it's a form of yoga. It's a Western yoga. Again, I often label myself as a Western adept, and I'm very, very specific in saying Western adept versus, we'll say, like an adept just in general. Because my journey has come through the Western world. So the challenges that are faced living in a Western world, what you must overcome in the Western world, that fixation to matter, the emotional process that humanity is only now just starting to learn how to do in very small pockets. Because the true transmutation of energy cannot be done without transmuting out that energy out of the system, because otherwise it's too dense and too heavy to move through. So as a Western adept, This is a form of my Western yoga. Being able to guide you and teach you through the learnings and the teachings and the process and the way it happens. And because I'm explaining everything as it happens, and because there's many, many spaces and created pockets within the space for you to activate that can engage and ask questions about anything that's being done in the space, so that you're learning the science, learning the know-how, because these are infinite and vast topics. So there's many, many possibilities for you to engage and anything that you don't understand to get more clarity on as well. Because in the expansion of consciousness, you have to understand what's happening. Otherwise, it's not going to be an expansion of consciousness, because it's just like magic. Somebody waves a wand and something changes. Yeah, but how did it happen? And that's the difference. So you're going through that journey. And so this is a form of Western yoga. And yoga, just as I said before, yoga means union. It's to yoke something together. And what you're yoking together is you and divinity. And you follow your divine path. And in the space, after the space of 12 months, at the level of your consciousness, your world will be different. You will see the world differently. You will understand the world differently. And the language of symbolism, which you will now understand much, much deeper. You know, people talk about symbols as, they don't understand their consciousness. You can't just generalize a symbol, because you'll most likely go wrong. You learn how to speak to symbols. You learn how to have symbols speak to you, to follow them. You learn how to use them in ritual, as talismans, to empower them. Many different aspects. We learn different sciences of different things, of modalities that are out there in this world. Like, there's many modalities in this world that for our idea of consciousness are just skimming the surface. You know, like breath work and different things. Not taking a go at anything here, by the way. But a lot of people don't really understand the true science of what's happening in that breath. What's happening with divinity? What is science? What's actually really happening from the many various levels of consciousness? You know, people use plant medicines, but they don't really understand the higher planes of consciousness of what's really happening in them. What doors are being opened? What's really happening? How do you integrate these experiences, these mystical experiences? And not just generalize them because of something you read in a book, but how to know them intimately because you've had the experience that expands you to the teaching that you can then comprehend and apply in your life. And so it is a form of yoga. Learning about different modalities, different aspects, different tools, different uses, how to apply ritual, how to understand ritual, how to invoke ritual, how to create power in your ritual. Again, the science of divinity, how to navigate things, how to understand things, how the science and the laws of consciousness itself operates. We go deep into Hermeticism. Hermeticism is not something that you study in a book. You know, it's called a philosophy, but most people, what they understand in philosophy is not what we'd understand philosophy to be. It's a surface level philosophy. Philosophy is an experience, and through the experience to understand intimately the science of consciousness, how it works, how it moves, how it operates, so that I can read it and know what it's speaking to me, know where it will go next. Another thing that you learn in this space is something that's termed augury or prophecy. It's not woo-woo, it's science. When you start to know how consciousness operates, how it moves, how it feels, how it speaks, how to read it, how to get in alignment with it, you can feel these and you can navigate these cycles before they happen. That's part of the depth of the guidance that I offer in this space, is I know what's going to happen before it happens, because I know through the cycles of consciousness. This is what we do, is when we navigate them. And so in the guidance that I give week to week and day to day is to hold you for what you will experience in that week and that day, and the tools and how to go deeper, how to process it, how to sit with it, how to move it, how to transmute it, gaining mastery over levels of your system that can't be gained anywhere else. And with that depth of understanding of what you're going to experience, it allows you to actually navigate the experience of your life far deeper, creating far more depth in the transmutation and the movements and the shifts that you have throughout the space of this 12 months. You know, if you think about life, like life is not what most people think it is. People think about life as its biological life. It's here we are as an organism, a biological organism. That's just the vehicle that life is pulsing through. If you can imagine just visually for a moment, do you know when you see like in a hospital, the heart monitor with the blip? if you've just visualized that that's actually what life is, then there's all these layers that are dumped on top of it. Imbalances, wounds, traumas, experiences in past lives, experiences in the both lineages of the ancestral lineages of who both your parents are in any given incarnation. And so there's wounds and imbalances that are infinite, that are all layered on top of that blip. And we have identities. I think I'm this person. I think I'm that person. I'm the person who likes this. I don't like that. I'm the person who's extroverted. I'm the person who's introverted. These are all identities. No, I can't do that because, I have an illness. And we have all these identities, and that's not who you truly are. We start taking you to the source of where that blip exists, moving through the layers that makes you think this, and makes you think that. This makes you think that. So it curtails the decisions that you make in life that take you away from who you truly are, because something so deep in the system is forcing a version of reality for you to make you think that, no, I don't like this and I don't like this. And so we say no to things that could be great opportunities because of fear, things that happened in the past. We say yes to things because we're fear of saying no to things, vice versa. And so we start to move through all those layers, coming to the deeper sensory experience of that, where that getting closer to where divinity itself operates, your divine part. Understanding through many, many realizations and integrations that happen, phenomenal shifts throughout the space, many, many times. Realizing who you thought you were is not who you are. And that's why it is quite a powerful shift, and not for everybody. Even though the space is held and you're held through every moment of the journey. These are big shifts, big undertakings, taking you deeper into purpose. But just remember that with purpose, as you come deeper into who you are, you face deeper challenges. The expansion of consciousness happens and growth happens through the challenges. Facing parts of yourself that are difficult to let go of, but they will be held throughout the space. So I just want to reiterate that it is quite a powerful journey. And even with being held and guided in every single way, you will face some difficult parts in there. And there's avenues of support that are available for every single step of the journey as you go through. But this is all to get you deeper into that union, deeper into that divine part of who you are. That's what mystery schools do. And that's what we do. A lot of the so-called esoteric wisdom that's been shared out in this world it's 99% still material based. It's academic, it's intellectualized. As I've said, once you go beyond materialism, it has to be experienced. You cannot expand your consciousness through reading a book about learning somebody else's experience. Like, you can pick up any book from, any alchemist or any mystic or, any person. You even read the religious texts of Yeshua, who's a master. Something I won't go into right now, but there's a very misconception about the teachings of Yeshua and who he actually was. We'll say that we would understand it quite deeply because the masters teach it. Yeshua himself teaches it. But a lot of that is material based, where people are kind of, oh yeah, I read that on the surface and that makes sense to me. Okay, that means that and that means that. Yeah, but that's still material based, because you're still intellectualizing from the surface what it means. We take you through an experience of the wisdom, where you no longer look at it and intellectualize it, is because you have actually experienced it within the navigation of your own life. It's a conscious expression that we open up. And as you live your life, you will live that expression, but in your life at this time in humanity, letting you to truly understand what was conveyed in those words by the conscious experience that you have now had. Things that cannot be put into words. I often use analogy again as like, you can imagine here we are on the land, and let's just say there's a lake over here. And you've never went into that lake. You've never been submerged in water ever in your life. But you know all about water. You've read every book about water. You've spoke to every person who ever submerged themselves in water. Like you literally are the expert on water, but yet you've never been in it. So as far as you're concerned, I know what that is. And this is what like conscious expansion is like. Now let's say you go in and you go to the bottom of that lake. Now that's an experience. That's a very, very different experience. No matter what books you read, no matter what reference you had, will never ever compare to the reality of what you're now experiencing. What it feels like to have to hold your breath. Maybe there's different currents in that water that you can feel breeze past your skin. Maybe the hairs on your arms. Maybe there's particles in that water. Maybe there's sand or there's little bits of grit. Maybe there's little bits of reeds, or there's life down there. So this is a whole different experience now, what you're having. So you can see that's what like a conscious expansion is like. It's because consciousness is fractal. It will always make sense to you for the bandwidth of consciousness that you have. But you can't expand the bandwidth without having a new experience. When you have a new experience, now you have new sensory information to take in to now make sense of at a deeper level. So yes, this was true, but now this is a deeper truth, and this is a deeper truth, and a deeper truth. And this is what happens to you throughout the journey of the school. Your consciousness expands and expands and expands. So everything that made sense to you here still makes sense, but now just makes a deeper sense. And this is what happens, because you're moving away from materialism into deep sensory experience of things that are far beyond the material plane of consciousness. And don't get me wrong, all planes of consciousness exist in the one space at all times. It's just that your senses have not been attuned to them, to understand them, to pick them up, to be able to differentiate them. Because again, the conditioning of how you've been taught, you haven't been taught how to work those senses in that way. You haven't had the experiences either, or been taught how to. And that's what this school does. Not that we're going to be changing your experiences, because you're just going to be living your life exactly as you live your life, but with the sight and the sensory experience to start to correlate things that are happening at much, much, much deeper levels. And that's the way that it works. And so the different topics that we go into. So again, whenever I do this, I'll most likely forget many of the topics that I'm trying to think of. But like one of the main things is Hermeticism. And as I just touched on before, Hermeticism is not something that you can read in a book. You can study it and you'll have an idea, again, the book. But you have to have the experience to really understand how this is all experience. You need to know how they work on the different planes of consciousness, what this experience is like. And so Hermeticism, we go deep into Hermeticism. And again, through everything that happens, through all the guidance, I reference everything. I reference Hermeticism, I reference Kabbalah, symbols, mythology, different cultures, cosmogonies, everything mixed into one. So that you're seeing the correlation of all these different things. Because what happens with a lot of people from the academic, or the intellectual pursuit, is they read one culture's thing. So for example, a Hermetic, you could say from the Egyptian, say, okay, well, this is that. Then they go, oh no, but this is Gnostic. And they start to create changes. And this is difference to this, to this. Then they'll go into something like, let's just say, shamanism. And so what they're doing is they're subsetting all these different things, and they're saying, this is different to that, and that's different to that. You see, we don't do that. We understand everything as the one thing, like I said at the beginning. And so shamanism adds to Hermeticism. It gives you a deeper layer or a deeper lens of understanding, because it's the same thing we're all looking at and studying and moving and wielding. We just label it different ways, and we approach it in different ways from different cultures and different approaches. And even in some cultures, there's different approaches. Like in Egypt, you had the mysteries of Isis, of Osiris, of Thoth, of Horus, of different deities. And they'd approach the mysteries in different ways, but it's still the same one consciousness that we're looking at. And so that's what we do. We blow out the walls of materialism. We get rid of that. We don't live there. We don't operate there. And we don't say like, oh, well, that's Gnostic and that can't be that and that's that. It's like, no, we'll give you one conscious expression for everything so that you understand all, so that you have a deeper experience, and so that you can navigate it and wield it deeper into your own life's experience, which is what it's all about. Experiencing life deeper. Having deeper experiences, more vast experiences. Deeper connections. Deeper interactions. Deeper impact in every single thing that you do in your life, because you have that level of consciousness that goes into everything. Deeper relationships, deeper teachings, deeper experiences. The work that you do goes far deeper. If you hold space, holding far deeper spaces, because you're much more aware of what's really happening. Tightening up that space to create more power in the sacred that operates in there, because you're now aware of where those leaks were, things that you weren't aware of before. Aware of what you're doing scientifically in those spaces or in any project that maybe that you create or work, because you now understand it at a much deeper level, which then the creative project or the end project now has a much deeper impact because it's much more consciously developed, much more conscious in your interactions, in your conversations, in your inputs, creating better outputs. Vast, infinite in all areas. And so Hermeticism we study. And I say study, but we're not sitting down studying it. You learn it through what you're guided with in there, so that you understand it by what happens in your life. Alchemy, which is the practice, the practical part of Hermeticism. Hermeticism is the scientific philosophy, which is science. Alchemy is how I work it, how to transmute it. Because alchemy is what I do in the space with your shadow, is I transmute it. Kabbalah, ancient Jewish mysticism, and again, another system of mysticism that teaches us how to navigate consciousness. So Hermeticism is the same for me as Kabbalah. They're just different terminologies and approaches. Kabbalah is quite a vast and infinite system. It's a beautiful system. Go deep into Kabbalah. Go into the language of symbolism, which is the language of divinity, of consciousness itself, which you learn constantly. That's my number one language. I guide you through that constantly, so that you're constantly learning. Every single moment of the 12 months, you're learning all these. And the best thing about it is you're learning it without even realizing that you're learning it. That's the way that I teach. I teach through experience. And that's very, very hard to comprehend here, and I totally understand that. So you'd have to trust me when I say that, or speak to some previous students, and their experience would probably speak better than just me saying it here. But that's the way that it works. Mythology. Again, understanding mythology, because mythology is, again, the story of humanity's journey. It's the truest history that we actually have. No, history is material-based. The winner writes it. And it's a bit of an angled story. You can't always trust it. Mythology is the story of consciousness's evolution, and the story that we all go through. And that's brought into everything else that we do as well. You get the stories of mythology. We take you through different mysteries at different times. Like sometimes I go through something more aligned in the Eleusinian. Sometimes something comes more in the Egyptian. Sometimes I take something more in like Bacchus or Dionysus, we'll say. But these are all the same thing, just different uses, and different cultures as different uses, we'll say. And so you're learning all these. Understanding about deities, archetypes. And I don't even like the word archetype for what I would do in this space, because archetypes are too rigid for me. Nothing in consciousness can be rigid. Understanding the difference between most people's concepts of deities versus what they truly are. They're embodied parts of our own consciousness at varying times. So again, similar to that archetype thing that Jung coined. But I think archetype, even for me, is a little bit too rigid for what I experience or what I understand or what I wield with them. So you get a teaching and an experiential teaching and learning of those, again, naturally, as you go throughout the journey of the space. Theurgy. Theurgy is the use of ritual. So again, I work deeply in the form of Zoroastrian magi, which is kind of like a form of ceremonial magic that's mixed with a lot of ritual. Learning about ritual. We do rituals in the space at varying times throughout the year to move the energy, to create big transmutations, moving your shadow, transmuting it into light. So I take you through rituals. I also teach you about rituals, how to perform ritual, the act of ritual. What are you actually doing in ritual? Getting you down to the raw consciousness, creating more power in your rituals, teaching you how to create rituals, how to connect to rituals, how to bring forth rituals, how you do them at different times. And I use rituals for different people as well as we go throughout the journey. There's 4 one-to-ones that are actionable or can be activated throughout the space of the year as well. And sometimes, depending on where somebody is, I might give them a ritual if something shows themselves to help clear things for them. But you will learn about ritual, how to do it yourself, the power of ritual, the connection to ritual. And that is the process of theurgy. We go into tarot quite deeply. I work, quite deep, like with the ancient mysteries, we'll say, with tarot, which is very, very ancient. Not about, just remember, divination, all these things are kind of more upwards on the scale of at the surface, closer to the surface. When we operate from consciousness's root, again, that blip of life, we'll say, like I said, on that machine, we work from that level in the mystery schools of divinity, which means that every other aspect that you work is a lesser version, which means that once you go to the root, everything else is easier. Once you understand it from the root of consciousness, you can add anything to it on the lesser. So divination becomes easy if you understand about the conscious part of it, of tarot, the evolution of tarot, the evolution of consciousness through tarot, the evolution of your individual growth of consciousness aligned with the greater consciousness through tarot, symbolism through tarot, hermeticism through tarot, Kabbalah through tarot, mythology through tarot. Everything for me, as I said, conjoins in everything. That's why you're learning so deep. That's why you're expanding so deep in such a space, is because every single thing that's used to teach and guide, I use everything in it, because everything is in it. It's the one consciousness. So it's vast, it's rich, and it's infinite, which is why you can understand, I cannot convey what is experienced in the space. We also touch on aspects of not so much theology, but we do go into some of the religious teachings, because the religious teachings are shared by masters. The story is often misconstrued by lesser consciousness dictating what the masters were doing, because they didn't have the same level of consciousness. So we open up a lot of religious texts, esoteric texts, and we break them down. And again, because in the flow of consciousness, in the channel of Kem Shevu, where I work, the master Kem Shevu is what I work at the infinite level, at the soul level. That's what I work with in a space, in a channel. I don't decide anything. I have what I do throughout the space, but I go with what is required by what comes up in the space at all times, which means that the content is always absolutely aimed at those in the space for exactly what they need at any given times. And so we bring in teachings of, different texts and different modalities and different things and practices and various times, depending on the timing in consciousness, which is always right and ready for those within the space at all times. Touching on aspects of ceremonial magic, another process, another method of the same thing of understanding consciousness, our placement within it, and how to wield it. And again, we always work in the light. This is working under the Ascended Masters with the Brotherhood of Light. That's the way that we work here. The only difference between dark magic and light magic is the person who wields it. Energy is energy. What you do with it is whether it's shadow or light. We don't speak too much on the shadow, but we warn you about it. We give the teachings of the masters as well, and their warnings about the shadow, as well as our own experiences of it as well, just to help us understand the shadow that we navigate as we move through. The same with shamanism. Just remember again, shamanism is just another practice, very ancient, kind of a more primitive practice, to be quite honest, but primitive in some forms, but not exactly primitive, of course. But it's another means of understanding consciousness, our placement within it, and the wielding of it for healing and for, and for betterment and for the uplift. So again, it's all correlated into each other. We go much more, it's not so much what people would be considered shamanism, but we would go more to the depth of like the elementals, into the different, what exists in the different subsets of the planes of consciousness. Like in the material plane, there's seven subplanes. Astral plane, 7 subplanes. And again, each of those subplanes, you can go to 7 subplanes again. It's quite vast. But we go into the metaphysical science where necessary. So understanding the elementals, the ancient elementals, how, first of all, how negative an impact that it can have on us, how much of a positive impact that it can have on us. So really kind of picking apart, I suppose, what would be considered shamanism, but at a much more detailed scientific level, I suppose you really could say. But again, just understanding that these are all practices and modalities and cultural means of understanding consciousness, our placement with it, and how to wield it. So it's all the same thing. Another spoke on that wheel, you could say. This is all experienced through the space of the school. What we go into as well is philosophy. And now I want to be clear here. Just remember, everything in today's modern world has been watered down. The ancient mystery schools were having navigation experiences in consciousness. They weren't just reading someone else's interpretation and saying, oh, that's nice. They were going in and embracing it. That's the only way you can have an expanded consciousness, is you have to navigate it. And so a lot of words and modalities of today, those words meant far different things in very ancient times. And so that term philosophy, most people think, oh, we're going to sit down and study philosophers. No, you're not. Absolutely not. Philosophy in this very ancient way has 6 subheadings. And I'm going to bounce a little bit of the teachings of Manly Hall here, if any of you have heard of him, because Manly Hall has captured this quite beautifully, so I'm going to just bounce off his. There's no point in me trying to reiterate because he's already done such a good job. And so there's 6 arms in philosophy. One is metaphysics. So metaphysics is about the science of the cosmology, the birthing of how the universe came to be, understanding creation itself. So again, that we can understand how we're manifesting and creating our own lives and purpose. Theology. So again, going into like different spiritual and cultural, we say, understandings of spirituality and the science of cosmology and the birthing of the universe and how we came to be and who are we and and things. So going into different religious and sacred texts, understanding that side, that's an arm of philosophy. Going quite deep into the science, the conscious science, metaphysics. Then you also have logic. So logic is like the laws that govern rational thinking. So understanding the mind and the way that it thinks. Again, through all these are coming together. These are not sit down set topics. These are all being learned again through your journey. You're not sitting down and trying to load information into your head. You are learning all this. And the way that I teach is the way that we teach from the higher planes. Again, with the way that we teach as a hierophant in the mystery school. It's what I'm working up here in the higher conscious planes you'll never be aware of. You'll only be aware when the physical parts drop through you. The awareness. Now I understand it. Now I get it. So you're not sitting down teaching these like in a set classroom. You are learning. I'm teaching you these in higher planes of consciousness. So at a certain times throughout the journey of the school, you become aware of them in the physical plane. So you're almost I'm feeding these through your subconscious constantly, so that at the right time, when we move the right shadow, when we transmute the right piece, it all floods down, and then you realize the level of work that you've attained. And that's what I'm saying. That happens many times throughout the space of this school. Many, many times. And I can't say how many, because that depends on each individual person, by how much you engage, how much you come into the space, how much you action. So it's relative, basically. But it's all been done. So that's what logic is. Then we have ethics. So ethics is like the science of morality, responsibility, which is all about the new aeon, about being responsible. You can only be as sovereign or as free in your life as the amount of responsibility you're willing to take on. And that's what we come back into self. It's nobody else's fault. I make all the decisions of my life. This is where we come into levels of mastery. I can spend my life blaming the world out there, or I can take responsibility for the decisions I take. Start saying no to things that don't suit me. Start saying yes to things. And of course, they're all rooted in wounds and imbalances, and we navigate through all those. Just remember, everything I'm talking about here in a linear format, even if it is linear or not, I'm not even too sure, but these are all happening in unison at the same time. Because again, that 360-degree sphere, we're expanding all levels at all times, keeping all the others in check to make sure that we have a balanced expansion in consciousness, which is what the mystery schools do. Then we have psychology, which is another part of philosophy. And again, most people's idea of psychology is surface level psychology, what we understand in the mystery schools. So psychology is like the investigation and the classification of like mental origins, thinking. Where does it come from? Remember, logic is like rational thinking, the laws that govern rational thinking. There's a science in that. There's a metaphysical science in that. And these are all interrelaced, by the way. But psychology is going much, much deeper. And you see, the difference is most people in today's materialistic world study psychology academically, on the surface, reading someone else's experience of the psyche. Like Jung, for example. Jung was a mystic. Jung basically did what we do in these schools. And so you're no longer learning psychology through somebody else's words. You're learning it through your experience, navigating the shadow. That's what we do in the mystery schools. You navigate the darkness. You're no longer regurgitating somebody else's explanation of what they did when they did it. You will now describe it by your own words, becoming a master. So you're starting to see how the mystery schools of old have held people who went into purpose and whose names you still know today. Is because they weren't copying anybody else. They came into who they were, using their words to describe things that they experienced, and not just kind of, yeah, that makes sense to me, what they're describing. It's like, no, I don't want to just intellectualize an understanding. I want to experience it myself, and I'll convey it through my own personal conveyance by having my own personal experience. Then epistemology. So this is like the science of the nature of knowledge itself. So this is where we really come into like as you can imagine, like you're crossing all these across. Like where did knowledge itself come from? Like, is it divine? Where does it come from? And we can get that through mythologies. We get it through cosmologies of different cultures. Where did it start? Genesis being one that maybe most people are familiar with. That's a cosmology. How did the universe form? Now, again, that's written in a quite symbolic text that most people can't comprehend. But that is extremely deeply scientific when you really go into it. So that's epistemology. Then the final arm of philosophy, which is the sixth one, is aesthetics. And so aesthetics is like the science of nature itself, and the reactions awarded by like beauty, harmony, things like that. So again, if you think about like the essence of things, what is it makes me align to certain things because I feel that they're beautiful or radiant or balanced versus things that are not. That's something innate in my consciousness that draws me to that. A beautiful flower with a beautiful color that I'm walking through, the fields or the forests, and it just catches my eye and it just almost overwhelms me with this intensity of sensation, of an experience. There's something in that color, there's something in that symmetry. There's something in the essence of that beauty, in the aesthetics of what came through. I go into a beautiful cathedral built in the harmonies of sacred geometry, a beautiful Gothic cathedral, and I have this divine experience. And it's partly because the architecture itself is created through divine aesthetics, following like the golden ratio of pi, and that it's built into it, that I'm having this experience. So this is all like this, where we talk about like aesthetics. We're not talking about the surface, we're talking about the sensation, the activation, the sensory experience at deeper levels of consciousness that activate these things of divinity within ourselves as we connect our own divinity to divinity externally. This is the philosophy we talk about. And we don't study it outside of it. We study it by the experience we have. It's like diving in and experiencing it and learning it for ourselves. And just remember, this is all happening with everything else at the same time as well. And so the 12-month space, or the year, is a space of healing. Just remember, like all these words mean the same thing to me. Healing, expanding consciousness, creating more balance in the system, gaining back more of our life force energy. These are all the same thing to me. Just remember, words are limiting unless you expand them into their symbolic expression. You're going to go through deep darkness of your shadow, navigate it, but held in the space as I hold the space. Guided through, as I said, what's going to happen each week so that you can navigate it deeper. Navigate it day to day then through philosophical quotes and expansion and opening up symbolically of how you can navigate it, how to apply it, how it might show up in your life in very, specific, detailed events. How to do that, how to navigate it, how to sit with that. The tips on how to get through it, how to become aware of when you're in your shadow and when you're not, how to become aware of what's, all the vices, the things that we do to numb, to avoid, things that you'd never even think of before, and also how to overcome them. Rational steps to gain mastery over your system so that you heal, expand consciousness, understand, develop, advance, remove false identities and step into deeper, truer ones. Become more of who you are. So navigating the shadow, that's what we do. We're navigating, this is what the mysteries are. When we go into, again, the underworld, into those dark months, aligned with nature, coming back into unison with nature herself. Because that's where we're in flow. That's where humanity has gone wrong. And always will, at different times. Life has gotten difficult and constricting because we're not on the central path. We have tried to control nature. We have tried to contain dominion. We think that we're in charge. I say we, but in a lot of cases out there. This takes you back to your sovereignty. Realizing what it is. Not trying to control, but learning to adapt. Learning to release control. Learning to trust. Learning to open up to what is there to be received by you. Not chasing things which chases them away, but learning to release and relinquish control and have what is yours divinely come to you. learning to release control in all areas, that life is a sway. Sometimes it's positive, sometimes it's negative, but all are part of the one, and how to accept it. And not to fight the bad days, but to embrace them and learn from them and to transmute them. Not to fixate on the good days, but to roll with them when they're there. And to be okay with that sway when it goes back or forward, that you know how to maximize each to create the betterment of your own life. I was just saying with the rituals in there are quite deep that I do at different times, and if something feels right, but there's ones in particular that I activate more so around helping and aiding the initiation that happens throughout the space. Like, this is the highest tier of my work that I do. This is where I give the most of my energy, by taking on the shadow of each individual person to transmute it through my own system and in by the ways that you activate it and engage it throughout that space. There's also included now with the Golden Rose Mystery School is a 2-day residential retreat, accommodation and food included, which I haven't decided exactly yet, but it will be about either 2 months or 1 month before the end of the school. And that's so that I have my aspirants, my initiates, in the space with me to work over those 2 days. And I'll be working fully over those 2 days to transmute anything that's left residue in the system, to create the clearance, to create the understanding, and to create the actual initiation in person of what I'm transmuting in the space. So that 2-day retreat is also part of included in the school as well, which is about a month or two before the end of the school, giving time to create the activation and the movement, huge transmutation of what I can do in person, and then also leaving maybe a bit of space afterwards for that pieces to integrate in again before the ending of the school, when you kind of really go back out into the world fully evolved, you could say, with the new level of consciousness and how you're going to engage and live your life now. And believe me when I say your life will never be the same again, because you will no longer see reality in the same way anymore. You're going to be experiencing, I say see, but you're going to be experiencing reality at a much, much deeper level. All these teachings will be embodied. Embodied is not like, okay, something I have stored up here. That's why we don't teach in the way of like modern schools. We teach through experience, so that you are naturally embodying it as you go through. And which means that like this school is going to change everything about you, everything about every person who interacts with you. The ripple effect of consciousness is that your light will now expand and ripple outward to anybody you interact with. How you raise your children will be so different. You will be raising them prepared for the new aeon. Every conversation that you have, because of your new awareness, will be seeding the person who you speak to by the level of awareness that you have, creating changes in their lives. How you operate, how you interact, how you hold space, how you see, how you talk, how you be, absolutely every infinite part of who you are and your being will be matched to the new level of consciousness. And so everything around you that interacts with you engages the positive and reaps the benefits of what you have achieved, aiding in the evolution of humanity in a more positive and blissful way. And like this new aeon I talk about a lot is because this is, my masters have brought me this, to bring this school in this time, is because we have breached a new aeon. This school will bring you fully into the expression of the new aeon, ahead of most other people or the collective, but putting you into a position of purpose, which means that you will be the aid in the evolution of humanity. It doesn't matter what you do as an occupation. As I said, every interaction will be with your new level of consciousness. Every person you speak to, you will be seeing them. It's not about holding space, although if you hold space, you'll be holding spaces at phenomenal depths of levels. Because you will now be understanding deeper what's happening, scientifically what's happening, understanding the wielding of the conscious planes, developing deeper into that, seeing, intuiting, but all from the divine levels at far, far deeper levels. Again, these are just words that are kind of, again, are pointless really, or they're empty until you have the experience. Then it'll make a lot more sense to you. And the masters that I have, that I work under, when I work in the channel, I work at my own soul level, which is Master Kem Shivu. That's the name was given to me in my adeptship, that I work when I'm in spaces. When I hold this space, I work as Kem Shivu. Peter Kelly is the individual. Kem She Vu is my soul's level, which is quite a vast level, as you can imagine. And so at the level of what I hold in space and what I transmute and what I work on, I work with Kem She Vu because that's the soul's level, can actually operate at that depth. And so what I navigate in the space for the aspirants who come through is I operate your shadow at my level of consciousness. So I'm able to work back karmically quite far back, past lives, really, really far back, clearing so much karma. And like this new way on, as the masters teach me, is all about responsibility and accountability. And so stepping into that new level, we'll say. And so that's one of the things about this school is the way that it operates. Is this school is designed in a way for you to walk through it, because you have to walk your path. I can't walk it for you. I can hold up here, I can transmute up here, but in your physical steps, only you can do that. Only you can sit with your emotions. Only you can take the step into your growth. Only you can say yes to things that are for you. Only you can say no to things that are not for you. I can't do that piece. And so the way that this space is organized, it's organized exactly for what's needed to get the initiation that's available for each person. And I often say, and I always say it, I can only work with you at the level that you allow me to work you with. And of course we have fears, we have blockages, what I call protectors in this system, from things that have happened in our past. Again, even at the ancestral level or at the previous incarnation level, at the soul's level is actually what I call it. And so we're cultivating trust and knocking down those barriers as we move through the duration of the school, so that I can get deeper in and transmute deeper levels of your shadow into light. And so trust is required, and trust cultivates throughout the journey of the school more and more and more. And so that's what we're working. And so what I say is the most you will get out of this space is the most of your energy that you bring in here. The space is designed with many different multiple kind of facets that are in there for this. First of all, it's an online space. You have access to a sacred, secure, confidential online space where only the other members of this school have access. In that space is where I upload the content. And so it's designed for today's world, which means that you're not coming in at set times sitting in front of me. I put content in every day or most days, depending on what feels right. And you have access to, you have an app on your phone, or you can access it through the web. Whenever you have time, whatever feels right to you, you come into the space by how you choose, putting the responsibility onto you. You come in and you engage the content. The content is all video or audio based. You come in, you watch the video in your time, whenever it feels right to you. You might be busy all week. Maybe you only come in at the weekends and catch up. Makes no difference to me. And it's the way that it's designed. It's the way that it works. It's the way that the energy is charged in the space. And so with busy lives and for today's world, first of all, it's online. You have easy access to it. But you come and go as you please. There's one monthly live each month, where it's 3 hours once a month. And that live is completely for you guys, for the aspirants. So that if there's anything that you're unclear about, if you want to do a healing on the live, no problem. If you feel comfortable, everything is available to you on that live. If you want to ask me about anything, if you want me to teach something deeper about any topic maybe that you're not grasping, anything, if you want to ask about something that's happening in the world, what's going to happen, what's seen, about the Ascended Masters, about mythology, you name it, that 3-hour live is for you. I come on that live for ye to engage me for anything that you need, which aids as support for ye as ye go through the journey. That's for ye. There's 4 one-to-one sessions that are available directly and personally with myself throughout the space, because as you navigate the 12 months, you're going to be hit with some difficult parts. It's part of the healing, it's part of the transmutation, it's part of the expansion. And so I can attune to anything in your field. I can make sense of anything. Unless you sit with me and with those experiences, you're not going to really understand it, but trust me that I can. And the way it is there's no need for anybody to suffer in the space more than what you need to as you go through something like a dark piece, we'll say. I will make sense of absolutely anything. So there's 4 one-to-ones, which are 1 hour each, that can be activated at any time throughout the space of the journey of the 12 months. Allowing you to integrate and to move through and to cleanse and to move, to transmute any piece that may be difficult to help you through it. Because things will get difficult at different times. Of course they will. I also, each member will receive a copy of both my books, my current books. On the beginning of the initiation of the school, you'll be given my first book, which is The Phoenix Birth, which will aid you through the first 6 months of the journey. It will activate you. It will give you guidance and support through the great work as what's conveyed in it esoterically. And then for the second half of the journey, the second 6 months, you'll be sent the saturated breath, which you'll see is more aligned in prophecy of what we're moving through now and different things and the activations that are in that. So they will also hold you. So they are included in the school as well. The content varies, but as I said, there's spaces in there that are, I have the main space, which is the temple space, which is where I put in the content. Now, as I said, the more you bring your energy in there, the more I can work with. The more you comment, comment on anything that's posted. You can share some of your own stuff. It's a sacred space, remember. And of course, that might take time to develop, and that's okay. But the point is the more of your energy you bring into that space, the more of your energy I can work with. The more you'll get out of it. So activating the one-to-ones, joining the lives. And if you don't make a live, that's okay. I record them and I upload them onto the space anyway. Not everybody's going to make the lives. We have busy lives. It's not possible. But the more you can engage, the better. Activating your one-to-ones throughout the space, getting more of your energy in there for me to work with and to transmute. And so the more you put in, the more you'll get out. There's spaces in there. There's private messaging spaces where you can message each other privately in there. There's also community space there if you want to upload any of your own content, we'll say, of related topics that you maybe want to have your own personal discussions on. That's completely yours. This is a temple space. It is a sacred space. It's a space for every single one of us. It's not just my space, it's your space. So use the space. Use it as you see fit. Once we honor the sacred, that's all that matters. There's certain rules and regulations about what we want in there and what we don't want in there. That's all laid out. And they're quite simple and quite subtle. But you bring yourself, any topics are open to discussion. And you have those freedoms in there. You have those spaces to activate those as you go through to enhance your experience, because it's not just about me holding this space. It's about ye coming into your own. Having those discussions. What do you think about this? What do you think about that? Yeah, this is something related to that. I thought it's kind of correlated to this. And bring in those, post in that video or whatever it is, or an article or whatever it might be, or a piece of poetry, whatever it might be, and discuss it. Because that's going to help expanding your own understanding of what is coming through the space. But the content in the space, that's the way that it goes. So like there's, I do a tarot video once a week. I go a particular card and I break it down deeply in all those aspects in Hermeticism and alchemy and mythology and Kabbalah, infinite, all those topics that I've mentioned and the different forms of philosophy. Bring it through a connection to what it's going to feel like, what it's going to be like for the week. Then I break down through ways of teaching symbols in there that I do kind of quite subliminally. I do quotes, and I open up quotes related to guidance of what you're going to do in that week and day to day and how to navigate things. Then I do videos on esoteric texts. And again, I don't like to stay rigid because I just follow the flow of consciousness. This is called to me, and maybe this is what's needed in the space. And I'll break them down. I'll open up symbolically, and I'll explain them what the consciousness is really describing for us in our world, of what it was like. Various. I can do teachings on different topics, depending on what's needed. Bring in practices, teaching about ritual, giving you rituals, giving you variants, giving you breaths, giving you connections, giving you modalities, whatever it is, throughout the space, it's vast. And with the Golden Rose Mystery School, I'm going to bring in a lot more classes, like as in based on teachings, we'll say, of maybe particular types of breaths to use, maybe different methods of navigating, we'll say, higher conscious planes, maybe the astral plane, of astral travel, different things like that. So these will be brought throughout the year. And again, in the flow of what feels right in consciousness. I never go beyond it. My personal will never dictates this space. I follow divinity. I follow what my masters show me at any given time and what consciousness itself shows me. That's what I flow with. When I'm in a channel, and when I work in this space, my channel is to come in and to work exactly whatever shadows need to be transmuted, whatever needs to be cleared to get each aspirant into the greatest and fullest expression of themselves as what you will avail of. But again, I cannot take your steps. It's like I can take the horse to water, but I can't make you drink it. I can't make you come in and comment. I can't make you activate a one-to-one. And I work it in that way because in the journey, we're not allowed to get in the way of your process. We can transmute it, we can aid you, we can support you, I can help you, I can guide you. But I can't force you here or there or there. They're the steps that you have to take. I can guide you that there's a step to be taken. I can highlight this, but I can't take the step for you. And that puts the onus back on the aspirant in the way that it always was meant to be in the ancient mystery schools, is that by what you give will equal what you receive. And so I think as much as what I can convey in words for now is in this. But as I said, this is an experience. This is the Golden Rose Mystery School. This is a true mystery school held in the level of adept or hierophant or high priest of the ancient schools, where we transmute your shadow in this space to create the deepest clearances possible for you to move further. But by learning all these aspects through your own experience of your life, correlating what they actually mean. Hard to put into words. And so if this sounds like something that you're interested in, if it sounds like something that you're open to commit to, that you're responsible enough, going to be accountable enough for your own journey in this space, I would love to have you in this space. I would love to take you through this journey. I would love to take you through a journey where you come into deeper levels of understanding reality, yourself, and your placement within it. And the role of these schools is for people to come into purpose, and by you transforming your consciousness, go out into the world after and live more consciously, which puts more light into this world and which helps clear the darkness of this world and move humanity into greater states of bliss, of what is actually truly available for us. And so if you're interested, reach out to me, and next we can schedule an individual call that can go a little bit deeper for any maybe questions that might have arisen, we'll say, after watching this video. Thank you.